welcome back number 25, Kevin Stevens.
We're all gonna have choices in life. 28 years old, never did a drug in my life. Someone handed me something. So one 30-second decision I made changed the past of my life. For the next 24 years, my life went like this. We're on TV now, so it's kind of
scary.
You know, our radio and our podcast can see on TV, which is kind of new to us. So painfully, like I sat with you guys for a long time, guys, and sat there and say it's never going to be me. You know, now I'm sitting here talking to you guys because it was me. I know how those people feel because I've been in those situations where I've been stuck, and when you're in it, you can't see it. It's very hard. It's a very difficult thing, addiction and substance abuse, and people need help, and we have to get out there and kind of educate people and try to do the best we can to help them.
Welcome to Crosscheck. My name is Andy Bernstein, and here, as always, is Alex Bazanson, filling in for the big guy who's out today.
Fourth line winger.
He's
Kevin
back.
Tachi.
The one, the only Kevin Tachi from
He's
WATD.
Best looking guy at ATD, right?
Face for radio.
Absolutely. Yeah. Monday Night Talk.
Yes, Kevin is here with us in spirit.
He is here with us in spirit. He is on assignment, but he will be back.
He will. He's out doing good deeds
He
today.
is doing good work. And also joining us today is Susan Silva from EB Hope.
Yes.
Which is East Bridgewater Hope.
Correct.
All right, we're going to hear from you in a second. But actually, tell us a quick snippet about EB Hope.
So EB Hope is a coalition movement in East Bridgewater, and the HOPE stands for Help, Outreach, Prevention, and Education.
You're doing some great work, and we're going to get to that in a second. But I wanted to cover something in the news that I thought would be very relevant, and it was actually last week. There was an adult patient who actually died of a lung disease because of vaping. And the Center for Disease and Prevention said that at least 193 people across 22 states have suffered from respiratory illnesses after vaping. That number has dramatically risen from the 94 cases that the CDC recently said it would investigate. In Illinois alone, health officials said in a release that the number of people who contracted a vaping-related respiratory illness had doubled in the past week from 11 to 22. So without going too far into the article, let's talk about vaping.
It's an epidemic, I believe, amongst the youth. They see it where it's, it's so easy to do, and it's not necessarily just nicotine. There are other products that can be used via vaping.
I think the problem with it is it was first marketed as an alternative to cigarettes,
right,
and as a safe alternative. And as we're finding out now, it is
like
not
everything
safe.
else. It just, yeah.
And like Kevin said, because of what they're vaping now, it's not just tobacco anymore.
Right, it's different flavors.
It's flavors, it's THC, it's everything. You can vape with everything, I guess. And I'm hearing it's the biggest problem in the Abington public schools right now.
Is that right?
Yes.
And they're doing it in the bathrooms?
In the bathrooms.
In the hallways.
Everywhere.
Yeah, so...
Sneaking in the locker.
Yeah, and it went as a cigarette alternative into this. And so, the numbers are starting to come out. It's kind of scary. And, Susan, I'd like to get your take on it, too.
I know in East Bridgewater, within the school system, and also at Southeastern Regional, where my son goes, this is a huge, huge problem. From my understanding, they vape in the hallways, they'll be walking down the hall, and when they're vaping marijuana within the school system, they're actually like blowing the smoke into an empty water bottle so that smell captures, yeah. So this is, you can't even go into a bathroom in a school system where there's not a bunch of people vaping.
And here's the other thing is I believe that school systems now are trying to get ahead of this by, isn't there a device that detects vaping? I
believe Plymouth put some in, but I understand that they're not as effective as they had hoped.
So what do we do about this? How do we fight this?
So it's interesting that you're saying that. I know a number of the schools have done parent meetings. It's pretty heartbreaking to know that there are parents that are buying these devices for their kids, and parents who think that this is okay. we need to get a stronger message out to our parents that this is detrimental to the health of our youth on a number of levels. You know, you talk about these lung diseases that are happening, but never mind just the addiction to a nicotine product. And the nicotine within vape juice is off the charts.
Right.
In one little pod is the same amount of nicotine as a whole pack of cigarettes.
Right.
And those kids can go through that pod in a day. So we really need to do much better at educating the parents.
Like I said, I think even the parents, you know, everyone thought this was a safe alternative.
Right.
And now it's coming out, you know, what, 10 years? Has it even been around 10 years?
Well, it's also
And
it's worth noting though is that these companies have marketed it as a safe alternative. So it begins with the companies that are offering it.
And I know our Attorney
Right.
General here in Massachusetts has started a lawsuit against these companies for that because they are marketing to kids and the different flavors and
Is there an age limit though? Can they just go buy it at a
no it's 21
It's
now.
21,
Correct.
21.
And
Some towns could do an exemption, I think, that would bring it down to 18, but I don't know if they have. But the state passed legislation that it's 21 now to purchase this.
so safe alternative for an adult is a different conversation than what's happening with our youth,
Right.
Because when you start to put an addictive substance into a young person under the age of 25, that's a whole different conversation than a safe alternative for someone who is an adult who wants to have a cessation
Exactly.
program for regular smoking. So they're two separate animals here.
It's the same as marijuana is legal for adults over 21, but kids shouldn't be using it.
Well, so that's the thing we've talked about marijuana before. That marijuana is not your father's marijuana.
No.
Exactly.
Right.
So it's really made up of very high THC content. And I wonder how many parents out there are like, well, you know,
It's only
just
marijuana.
Right.
Yeah.
It's legal. It's
Right.
Yeah.
Well, the thing I want to kind of throw is back the marijuana back in the 70s and 80s. The thought was that, as Susan had said about the vaping, that it could be as much as a full pack of cigarettes. That's what they said about smoking a marijuana cigarette back in the 70s and 80s. I would wonder what the vape product is, how exponentially
Right.
more significant that
Right.
product is compared to what it was if you were just smoking marijuana back, in the 70s or 80s.
It sounds like we have a dam and we put a thumb in the leak, and then something else comes
Yeah.
about.
I mean, even when we started the Abington Substance Awareness Coalition,
Where you're from, and I
where we're
botched the
from,
name.
and the first meeting I had back in 2015, Susan was a guest there. And someone from the sheriff's office and Jeff Deal and everyone, that's how we got started. But we didn't even think of this. This
Right.
wasn't even on the radar.
Right. And so here's
And
the
now it's what we're talking about at every meeting.
and you know what's funny? It's like, you know, whether you're in Canton or you're in Arlington or you're in Pittsburgh or whatever, these issues face everybody. So we could be talking about it here, but you're still not exempt from it,
Right.
you know.
And it's interesting that, you know, when we, a couple years back, when marijuana was becoming legal here in Massachusetts, we were hearing from the people out in Colorado and people out in Washington saying, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. And this is why you shouldn't do this, right? And I know in East Bridgewater, when this was on the ballot, we faced a major amount of pushback from the community, and a lot of ugly stuff happened on Facebook. But anyway, here we are a couple years later, and now all of a sudden, all the data is coming out.
Right.
How potent this is, how dangerous
right.
this is, how many kids have already been taken to the hospital, etc.
Exactly.
Like, we put that message out 2.5 years
Right.
ago, and you didn't want to listen. And
Right.
Colorado and Washington State have been putting that message out for years, and we here in Massachusetts didn't want to listen. And here we are reaping the bad fruit of our decision.
Right.
Part of the caveat, though, is again, you have an ever-changing philosophy with people saying, oh, well, it's not that bad. Also on top of it, knowing that every community faces a fiscal crunch, knowing that if you have a little bit of finances that are tied to it, that somehow you'll have funding coming in that's going to be able to help you, whether it's for education or municipal purposes. That, I think, is something that helped push this over the top in 2016. That was one of the things anyways.
Yeah.
I know for our coalition, we've been offered marijuana money from 2 separate entities, and we have said no, thank you.
Yeah.
And we will never accept funding.
No, that's like taking it from the tobacco company. It's the same thing. Interesting topic. The debate will go on. The discussion will go on, and we're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back.
1, 2, 3, 4. Boston, for Boston, we sing out round the fray. For Boston, till wisdom's earthly play. For here our water hearts are true, and the towers on the heights reach the heavens are blue. For Boston, till the echoes ring again. For Boston, till the echoes ring again.
Welcome back to Crosscheck. My name is Andy Bernstein, and we're here with Alex Bezanson of the Abington Substance Awareness Coalition
Very good.
in Abington, Mass.
That's right.
And you're the founder
One of the founders.
and a local businessman
Local
with
business.
the pulse on the people.
Okay.
All right. Kevin Tachi is joining us as well. He's filling in the big chair.
Yes.
His Merlot top on.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah,
He's
absolutely.
the Merlot line.
You can hear Kevin Tachi on.
Just before this program, if you're listening on 95.9 WATD, just doing a second stint.
I love of how you did that. You sounded like a baseball play-by-play guy.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Kevin's very experienced.
Kevin's the best.
He is.
He's our go-to guy. He sits in the big chair.
Appreciate it.
15 years ago, I was on his show.
It was a long time ago.
Yeah, well,
Promoting an Ice and Dice.
something
In
like
Abington,
that.
yeah.
What-
Yeah.
Alex, you're the best.
Yeah.
And joining us as our special co-host is Susan Silva from East Bridgewater Hope, EB Hope. And it's a great organization, and we're going to have Susan talk to us about the organization and how it got started. Take it away.
So how it got started. How it actually started was the fact that I'm a mom of a person in recovery.
Okay.
At that point in time, though, he was still in active use. And it's pretty difficult as a parent to sit back and do nothing, right? As parents, we want to fix something, and we can't fix our kids for the most part. So we look for things to do. And I was going to learn to cope back in, I'm going to say it was like 2009. And I always credit Joanne Peterson for giving me the courage to step out and do something. And,
Bravo. Yep.
she's an amazing lady. And I remember sitting in one of those meetings, and she was saying, you need to write letters to your town officials, to your state representatives, your state senators, and tell them they need to be doing something.
Being an advocate. And
Absolutely. Being an
Right.
advocate for your community and being an advocate for your family. So I did. I wrote letters, except I started with the town. And I wrote letters to all of my department heads within the town of East Bridgewater. And Chief John Cowan, who was the chief of police at that point, called me.
okay.
And he said, I got your letter, and I want to thank you. And I said, you want to thank me? Why do you want to thank me? And he's like, because you're the first person that hasn't blamed us. You actually want to do something
Because
about this.
leaders don't blame.
There was nothing to blame. I mean, I backed up my letter with all of that had been happening in East Bridgewater, all of the drug busts, et cetera, just to say, listen, I know that there's a problem in this community. How can I help? I want to be a voice within the community. And he got us all together. Well, first I met just with him in the conference room at the police department, and we talked about my story, my son's story, and what we both felt needed to be done. And we put together our very first meeting that October 2011 at the school and
Okay.
did an informational meeting.
Okay.
It was great. I mean, the first informational meeting, there was probably over 200 people out. We had a great group of people that were there, all the movers and shakers back then, just to kind of give out that education and what we called it, don't be blindsided.
Okay.
Right? Because that's how I felt my family was. We were blindsided by this. My son ended up addicted to OxyContin after 2 hand surgeries from a work-related injury. So we were blindsided, right?
Right.
And that's the message I wanted to get out there to parents. Like, don't feel bad. You know, this epidemic is blindsiding people. And so that's where we started.
Okay.
And from there, we decided we need to continue doing this. And we formed the coalition. And from there, we became a nonprofit and been doing all kinds of amazing stuff within our community.
I think it's interesting that you mentioned that because a lot of folks when you think of drug addiction, a lot of people don't realize that there's a stigmatism. That there was at one point in time there was a stigmatism. It was the bad kid. that was getting involved, not necessarily, a star athlete who got injured and during the process of, getting medical help somehow was given, pain relief via a pill that they somehow became addicted to. People, I think, at a certain point in time, and I think that's been changing over the years, but I think that's important that you mentioned that.
Stigma is still pretty much alive and well,
Oh,
especially
sure.
if you speak
It
to
is.
people that are still battling with the disease and still trying to come through and gain ground in their recovery. Stigma is still alive and well, and it's still alive and well for parents as well. As part of my story, one of the reasons I decided to step out is because we had moved to East Bridgewater in 2008, and we were welcomed into the little cul-de-sac community that we lived in, a little barbecue when we got there, et cetera. But as soon as they found out that my son had a problem, we had one family that came to us and said, we're working with an attorney to get you removed from our community, from our neighborhood,
How did
from
that feel?
this street.
How did that feel?
Humiliating.
Of course, and that's why that's why people don't speak up for that.
Absolutely. And that's one of the reasons I decided to do what I did, because I don't want another family member, another mom or dad or brother or sister to ever be humiliated like that again by somebody. Like, that's off the charts.
And the problem is, people like that, and I'll use that term, don't believe it can happen to them.
Absolutely.
Very
And it
true.
can happen to
NIMBY.
anybody.
NIMBY.
Anybody.
Not in my backyard, right?
Right. And you don't wish that on somebody, but there's a tiny little piece of you that wishes that they understand.
Right.
That there's someone close to them that they end up finding out about and maybe end up eventually having some empathy.
Yeah.
Although I don't wish that on anybody, but man.
Yeah, I mean, and to your point, you brought up stigma. No, the stigma's still there. And you know why I believe that the stigma's still there? Because until corporate America gets behind this and be okay and are okay.
And admits that they have a problem,
Right.
rather than trying to mask the problem.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
Sure, but I'm not saying. But I'm saying though, I feel that things are taking a turn that maybe people are realizing more and more about it not being a stigma. So you're right, it's
Yeah.
still there.
It's definitely getting better,
It's
I think,
changed.
because of all, EB starting theirs and Abington starting there and Whitman, and all these towns are now trying to do something. And we're doing shows like this with Kevin Stevens, famous athletes that are admitting they have a problem.
Right.
And I think that's all going to help down the road. It's still a long way to go, long way to go.
We had an admiral on, Admiral Sandy Winnifield, who was the Vice Joint Chiefs of Staff for the Obama administration, said he lost his son to a heroin overdose. He's like, I could fight wars, but I couldn't keep my son off of heroin. And, so here's a kid of means. So it's very real. So tell us about a lot of the programs that you're doing, or some of the different things that you're doing in the community, and how you work with law enforcement as well.
So obviously, right out of the gate, we were working with the East Bridgewater Police Department. That partnership started right away. They were always at our coalition meetings, and in 2015, when the Gloucester Police Department launched the Angel Initiative, we were sitting at our coalition meeting right after that, and I remember looking at Chief Cowan and then Sergeant Allen and saying, we need to be doing this. Like, how can we do this? And Scott went right away, and he dug into that topic to figure out how to make this work and what did we want it to look like. And, that was happening through the police department, and we wanted to do something that was more community-based. So we created the drop-in model, and
Okay.
that drop-in, 3 phases, three cohorts of people that we make sure that we're helping. The Angel Initiative was helping those in active use. Well, we definitely still, we wanted to do that, but we also wanted to make sure that parents had the resources that they needed.
And the drop-in center is people can go
Yep.
and they can just get advice, help.
Right.
Is
right.
this similar to Brockton's Champion Plan?
So the Brockton Champion Plan, again, only caters to those in active use to help connect them to treatment and resources. Our drop-in center is different in that we are looking to help the person who is in active use connect to treatment. We're looking to help parents find the resources that they need, and then also people in early recovery find the resources that they need. So our drop-in is it was happening twice a month. We're going to a once-a-month model where you can come in the door. You're greeted by people in recovery. You're greeted by volunteers that can be parents or people within the community who basically walk you around and connect you to the resources. In East Bridgewater, we have a clinician that is there to meet with people. That clinician has met with families. That clinician has met with people in active use, because we want to be sure that if we're going to get Johnny or Susie into treatment, that we're connecting them to the right treatment. That if they need dual diagnosis, we send them there. If they need a higher level of care and they need to go to a hospital, that we make sure that we're sending them there. So that piece is really important to us. I don't know if the Champion Plan has that part, but I know that we do offer that.
My understanding, my brief understanding is basically if somebody has a drug problem that they can walk to, they can go to the police station, the fire department, whether they have outstanding warrants or what have you, maybe they might have drugs on them, but they can go in, they're welcomed in, and then they're taken in and taken to treatment, per se, without any persecution. That's my understanding of it.
So at the
briefly.
Champion Plan, if you do have a warrant, that has to be cleared up first before they'll help you.
Okay.
And that's one of the reasons why we kept it away from the police department and did it within the community, so that that's not a barrier for someone. That's something they can deal with afterwards.
It sounds like the East Bridgewater Plan is a little bit more all-encompassing, and it's also it involves the family involvement as well.
Yeah, we've actually had family interventions there where families have come. We had one family of 15 walk in and sat down one night and did an intervention for a family member. That family member actually went right into treatment that night.
New Hope Chapel is where you do it, correct?
So New Hope is our Plymouth location. We're at the Community Covenant Church in East Bridgewater on the first Thursday of the month. And then we partnered with Plymouth. Plymouth originally was just doing the outreach portion, which is what PCO is now doing. The police and the recovery coaches, they're doing the outreach visits. And they wanted to start a drop-in center. And we merged in June of 2017 and became Plymouth County Outreach Hope. That's now the nonprofit. EB Hope is the coalition work in East Bridgewater, so we have 2 locations. We actually helped Wareham launch their drop-in center as well. We helped Attleboro and a couple of other communities launch theirs.
That's amazing. Talk to me about the nalox boxes. Can you speak to that?
Absolutely. So the last couple of years, we've received earmark funding through the state of Massachusetts through DPH. And each year we allot some of those funds to the police department, the Council on Aging, and then to the school system, so that each of these groups of people have some funding to be able to do some sort of initiative. And this year, I had seen the naloxone boxes, I guess on Facebook or something, and I reached out to Chief Allen and I said, hey, what do you think about this year? And he's like, yeah, let's do that. And they purchased the boxes and the Narcan. Chief Allen developed the protocol for each of the businesses and the training that would go into all of that. And they're out there now in the community. We've got 3 in the community right now, a 4th that's about to go out, and a lot of other places that are saying they're interested. And I see they're now doing that in Boston. I was like, oh, Mayor, like you stole that idea from us.
But this whole area of Plymouth County is just completely cutting edge, would you say?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And we've talked about that before. I think Plymouth County is leading the country in ideas like this. And,
Absolutely.
let people copy us.
Do people are people reaching out to you from other parts?
So that's really cool, right? So when we first started the drop-in center, Chief Allen was getting calls all the time from all over the country saying, what are you doing? Tell us about what the drop-in center is. And we've got like a business plan for the drop-in center, and he has shipped that thing out all over the place. Like if we decided to become a franchise and sold that, I could have retired by now, because that's how many people, that's how many different towns across the United States have actually been interested in what we're doing.
Yeah, no, because it just seems like there's so many, people are looking for answers.
They're looking for so one of the reasons we did this, right, is as a parent, when I was going through the worst of this with my son, I had no idea where the resources were. I didn't know where the detoxes were. I didn't know what a CSS was, didn't know what a TSS was, didn't know about sober living, didn't know about halfway houses, didn't know how all that continuum of care worked, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's why we did this. We wanted our community and Plymouth County to know that where you start a detox, or in an ER, started a detox, and how to maneuver through the system, and what's out there, and what is necessary for my son, my daughter, because every person who needs help has a different story. Some have a mental health background that needs to be addressed, so they belong in a dual diagnosis, or maybe they need to be in a psychiatric hospital, or maybe they've been running for so long that their body has been medically compromised. Well, they need a place like AdCare that's I think it's called a level 4 treatment facility where your medical needs are also taken care of too.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I didn't know any of this. When the very first time my son was in detox, we had Harvard Pilgrim Insurance, and day 4, the hospital called and said, you can come pick him up in the morning. I'm like, what? Well, why aren't we going further? Nope, insurance doesn't cover that. So we wanted to be sure that parents understood where to get their help their kids need, and how to maneuver through the system, and what the continuum of care should look like.
Because it's daunting.
Oh, it's horrible.
So I would ask do you feel that the growth of this organization has been helped locally, or has the state helped at all? Have you had any conversations with any agencies or anybody in the administration?
No.
Okay.
But they know what we're doing, obviously. We do get earmark funding. And
Okay.
I'm very, very grateful to Jeff Deal, to Senator Walter Timilty, and Alyssa Sullivan for pursuing all of this for us. They know the important work that we're doing. I believe what we've done up till now has been very, very important. We need to move forward. We need to make this go the next step, right? People know about the drop-in centers. The outreach is happening, and we need to go to the next level. In order to do that, we do need to be sitting down. We do need to be talking to the governor, to DPH, and say, listen, this has worked, and it's really gotten that continuum of care out there to people. People now understand, but we need to go the next step.
And that next step is to be speaking with big officials like the governor, or is there more to
Yes.
that next step?
Oh, I'm not talking about that just yet.
What do you have coming up? And this being a fundraiser
So,
or a nonprofit, what do you?
So in September 14th, Saturday night, we in East Bridgewater will be holding our vigil. Patrick Cronin, who is a person in long-term recovery, he'll be our keynote speaker. D.A. Cruz will be there. Sergeant Pattison will be speaking for the police department. The video that Brockton Area Prevention Collaborative puts together will be on that night. And if you've not seen that video, this year it's 28 minutes long.
That was the one that they did at the Massasoit recently
Yes.
at the vigil.
Yeah,
the
so
candlelight vigil.
they offer that to all of the towns within the collaborative. So the towns in the collaborative are East Bridgewater, Whitman, Hanson, Rockland, and Brockton, and we partner together. And they do a lot of the prevention work within our schools. They have the Drug Free Communities grant, so they go into our schools and get that key information into our school systems. So they've just been a huge, huge help to our coalition. So that's September 14th, 5:30 on the East Bridgewater Common. We'll have a resource fair. The vigil will start at 6. And this month, upcoming month in September, both of our drop-in centers will have a guest speaker that'll be speaking about vaping. So we've moved to one time a month in both of our locations, and we'll be bringing in guest speakers each month. One of the things that we're finding is people still need the information. People still need to hear
Absolutely.
about the topics that revolve around substance use, and that they'll come out to hear a speaker, and when they do, they'll see the other resources, which is pretty cool. We were awarded a grant from the Greater Brockton Health Alliance, and we've been doing an initiative called Healing Our Communities, and that basically has been it's a teaching for all of our volunteers. So we're doing 4 a year. That's coming up September 26th. If you're interested in that, you can reach out to me at susan.pcohope@gmail. We can get you the link. You can be a part of that training.
And the website?
Our website right now is still ebhopes.net.
Okay.
You can find us on Facebook, either EB Hopes or PCO Hope.
And lastly, how's your son doing?
So my son right now is a guest at the Plymouth House of Correction, but
Okay.
he's actually doing quite well.
Okay.
Doing really, really well.
Good.
Yeah.
Good to hear. Well, thank you. And you're going to stay with us for
Absolutely.
the rest of the show.
Sure.
Okay. We'll be right back on Crosscheck.
2, 3, 4. Boston for
Welcome back to Crosscheck. My name is Andy Bernstein here with Alex Bezanson, Abington Substance Awareness Coalition,
Thank you.
Abington businessman.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Kevin Tachi filling in the big chair with the Merlot top on.
You know what's funny is that I see we have another call up here, huh?
We do.
We do.
We do.
Another hockey player.
Yeah, but you know what? But he's not a fourth line mucker like
No,
me.
he's a mucker. He's a mucker and grinder.
We need to get a Sheriff McDonald bobblehead.
We do need a sheriff, but we'll talk about that.
He's like a second or third liner.
Got to
I'm
get a
telling you.
mold going, and we'll get it's a whole process. They're very
It is,
expensive
it
just to
is.
get them one off. Kevin's with WATD.
That's right. Follows us.
95.9.
I mean, we follow him.
Monday Night Talk.
Monday Night
6:15 to
Talk.
8, followed by Crosscheck Radio.
We love having Kevin Tachi filling in for the big guy. He'll be back next week. Kevin Stevens will be making his return appearance. So let's meet our guest here, Sheriff Joe McDonald, Jr. He was elected as the Sheriff of Plymouth County in November 2004. He was sworn into office by Governor Mitt Romney at the time. He's the 30th Sheriff of Plymouth County.
You did your research.
I did, and he is also served on Governor Charlie Baker's opioid working group for the law enforcement community, right?
Correct. Yeah, you know, it was a matter of some pride that the only two elected officials on the governor's opiate task force were myself and Mayor Bill Carpenter
Bill,
from Brockton.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
we're both Plymouth County guys. Yeah.
Bill
Plymouth-
did a great job.
That was
Great
that was when the governor came in. Governor Baker came into office and
Right.
actually formed that working group. Correct.
He did, yeah. Yeah.
Plymouth County continues to excel in this, and it's funny. We have a lot of Plymouth County folks on. Obviously, we are recording in Plymouth County, Mass, but the work they're doing is unbelievable.
But this is in many towns, and our podcast does, and we're on WATD. So other people have been copying Plymouth County and what our sheriff and our DA and EB Hope and everyone's doing, and police departments, and I think it's a model, like we said earlier, for other
best
towns.
practices
Right,
everywhere. So talk to us about what you're doing and your
Sure,
role as
sure.
sheriff.
You know, we work very, very closely with the district attorney's office and our local police departments. I know you've had the DA on before and talked about the Plymouth County Task Force. As you guys have correctly identified, what we're creating here is absolutely a national model. I do know that we get questions all the time, the DA, our office, local police, the folks that are involved in a lot of the community coalitions. How are you guys doing this? How are you seeing decreases in opiate deaths and overdoses? Yet nationally, we haven't seen those things. So we have been speaking at conferences. I know the DA has traveled several conferences and put on presentations. So what we're creating here is a national model, and I'm flattered. You know, some folks, there's no pride in authorship here. We want people to emulate what it is that we're doing because it works. And if they have great ideas, my grandfather always told me, you've got 2 ears and 1 mouth, maintain the ratio. So as much as I speak on these things, I like to listen and see what they're doing in other places, because maybe there are ideas that we're going to bring back here, and we're going to improve what it is that we're doing. So the fact that you guys are willing to come in and to talk about this and have the DA, myself, members of the community coalitions, this is very, very important, because the folks in our community need to know a few things, not the least of which is we're working on it, and secondly, that we're there for them and we can point them in the direction of the appropriate resources.
Just to follow up on what Andy had mentioned in regards to seeing a decrease in overdoses, that was a recent news. I think 11%. Was that the number that we've seen as of late?
Right, yeah, it was 11 or 12% a decrease, which is unprecedented, especially with nationally, those numbers are still, it takes some time to turn the Titanic around, but those numbers were still climbing. But we've seen some great results here in Plymouth County.
Especially with the fentanyl and everything today, too,
Yes.
and we're still seeing the decrease.
Yes, yeah. What's really nice about the way that we've done things here is that there really isn't any ownership of this.
Right.
It's a collective responsibility more than anything, I would say.
Yeah, there's no party politics
No,
or
it's
anything in this.
very
Everybody's
holistic.
looking for the same results.
I have a question for you
Yeah,
from
sure.
a law enforcement, because we talk a lot about treatment, right? We
Yeah.
talk about treatment and we talk about people, who, substance users. But tell me about, from a law enforcement perspective, with fentanyl being such a big problem and a lot of it's coming from China. How do you deal with that from the law enforcement angle?
Well, it's something that those policies and procedures are still evolving, because as time goes by, you correctly point out that this fentanyl, which is something we have never seen prior to the last couple of years, and the fentanyl makes things more difficult to deal with as a quantum leap, because it is so strong. And you have the ability or the danger, the risk of officers who don't even touch it, simply inhale it or pass by it, canine dogs that we're using to sniff out these drugs. You get exposure at a level that is potentially fatal by simply walking past something, which is amazing to us. So we're constantly having to improve our policies, our procedures, our equipment to detect these types of things as they're coming in and across the border and moved around within our communities. So, and the correctional facility, we have to be constantly vigilant about that stuff as well. But, we have seen that officers themselves risking their, it's a risky job to start with.
Right.
But then when you add those substances out there that are 100, 1,000, 10,000 times stronger than we've dealt with in the past, it's really scary stuff.
It is scary. And we had an author on our radio show, our old radio show, Sam Quinones, who wrote the book Dreamland.
Mm-hmm.
And Sam told us that, we talked about it's warfare in a lot of ways.
It feels like that. I know back in the 80s we talked about the war on drugs and all this stuff, but it really is an apt analogy. I can't think of anything else. We're constantly developing countermeasures to the measures that the drug dealers and manufacturers and those offshore sending it in are coming up with. You've got situations where you've got submarines. I recently saw a video of the Coast Guard intercepting a submarine that was completely it looked like a real submarine, and it was, instead of carrying military hardware, it was carrying drugs, for distribution. So it's unbelievable, some of the technology that's being brought. Time was, it was tunnels, and they still do stuff like that, but it's amazing.
And small aircraft,
flying it in planes, exactly. Yeah,
but there is so
tactical.
much money, they can buy submarines. It's amazing.
Opioid
Task Force. Can you give us a little more?
Sure, that's something I know the DA has talked about that on the show in the past.
Yep.
And, the Opioid Task Force is something that the DA's office and us and the local police department, we got together. It makes all the sense in the world, and I think that part of the reason that we're as successful as we are in Plymouth County is the fact that we collaborate the way we do. As Alex pointed out, and pointed out too, Andy, that, there's no politics here. We're all on the same team, and we're all pulling in the same direction. So we get the community coalitions, the faith-based groups, we get the police departments, the DA's office, the sheriff's office, all of these groups. I know Bridgewater State University is involved, Quincy College is involved. We have really brought all of the brains to bear that we can, and we collaborate when we look for grant money. We collaborate on those programs. The Eastbridge, the EB Hope stuff. They did those drop-in centers. Those were revolutionary. Now we've got the Plymouth County Outreach, and they're doing it countywide, and it's really. We've been able to take those good ideas, multiply them times 27 for all of the communities that we got, and get them out there. And I think it's really what the military call, here again, the war analogy, it's a force multiplier for all of us, not just in law enforcement, but all of those groups that are battling this opioid epidemic.
So as sheriff, how do you interact with the police, with Chief Allen?
Well, first off,
and the chiefs, because
sure.
it's different.
It can be, yeah. But Plymouth County is a special place in many, many ways. And one of those ways is that my background, I was an assistant DA for many years. So a lot of these guys who are the police chiefs now, I worked with them on cases when I was a young prosecutor. So early in their careers, we became friends. And this is a great thing. And the DA is a personal friend. We skated on the same hockey team for many years. So not only do I work with these guys as colleagues and ladies, but I'm friends with them. So we talk on a regular basis, and the beautiful thing about this is there's no ego involved. There's no worrying about who's taking credit for what. We just want to get the job done. So we work, and in Plymouth County we're a little bit different too, because we work on a daily basis in concert with our police departments. We've got the Bureau of Criminal Investigation, so we're doing a lot of work with their detective divisions. We have the canine units that come out into the community. So we're used to working hand in hand with those agencies. And it's absolutely been seamless, and it's been very rewarding to see the results that we're seeing here in Plymouth County. And the other dimension to this is that a lot of the folks, time was, you would think that, oh, geez, the unlucky folks are the ones who end up in a correctional facility, in jail, right? But, as time has gone on, I've learned and realized and heard from many of the folks in the community that oftentimes the lucky ones are the ones that get to come in with us, because we are the largest provider of detox services in the county at the jail, so we're busy, we're in the front lines too.
I can attest to that.
Why, you've been...
No, not me, but one of my son's best friends was addicted to heroin, and this was several years ago. And he ended up in Plymouth House of Correction for about 2 years, I think. And he hasn't touched drugs since he got out.
So there actually,
God
there
bless.
are programs in correctional facilities that are around.
Absolutely.
Treating.
Yeah, and we've had those types of programs for years and years. As the opioid epidemic has unfolded on us, we've had to improve and increase those programs. In fact, you might remember a few years ago, the Chapter 123, Section 35s, commonly referred to as Section 35.
Right.
A lot of those folks who are committed for good reason, they're a danger to themselves or the community, they're committed for secure drug treatment. A lot of them were coming. We were taking the overflow population. They all went to the Department of Corrections facility in Bridgewater. The overflow came to us, and that worked very well for a while. We also saw that they moved from the Bridgewater facility down to the State Forest in Plymouth, and it's a separate DOC facility that had a lot more space and whatnot. But now you're seeing, and that had some issues too, because they're out in the woods, they were far, they were remote from everything, and this wasn't as secure as it probably should be. But you're seeing a lot now that Springfield, the Hampden County Sheriff's Office, is doing the very same type of work, and they're doing great work. They're saving lives out there.
They just rolled in Narcan, is what I found out, like only a few years ago, maybe a year ago.
Yeah.
We had a reporter on from the Springfield Republic, and she had told us that they had just started to embrace Narcan there. And they're doing like harm reduction sites.
Yep. Yeah.
Mental health. How is the county treating mental health?
Well, we are here again, we're the largest provider of detox services. We're also the largest provider of mental health services as well. Because as you can imagine, and this, there's a philosophical problem that I have. Years and years ago, the government engaged in something known as deinstitutionalization. They thought it was inhumane to have people who were substance addicted or people who had mental health issues have them in a setting that would have been, more of a secure type of a setting. So they deinstitutionalized everybody, and they sent them out of those secure, relatively safe settings. And some of them were problematic. I'll be the first guy to say that. But where did those folks end up? They ended up in the community, and not all of them were equipped to deal with life in the community. And unfortunately, and we've worked to change this as well, when they're in the community and they're acting, a little bit odd, people don't know how to necessarily react to that. And their reaction usually was to call the police, who would respond. And the police aren't necessarily trained, although we're much better at that now at the police academy. We talk about these things to deal with people with mental health issues. These are actual components in the police academy now. But generally speaking, those folks who were unable to acclimate to life outside would end up violating the law and ultimately end up incarcerated. So what they've done essentially is taken people from a hospital type setting or an assisted living type setting and move them over into a correctional setting, which I think is morally wrong. We're doing the best that we can. I will say that, and our people that provide program services are the best in the business. But I do think that our colleagues in the public health sector, DPH, needs to step this up. They need to have secure drug treatment programs that aren't in a correctional setting. Now, certainly some people that commit crimes, they need to be with us to do this. But I think that there should be an option, short of a correctional facility, for them to do this. Also, people with mental health issues. Let's get them into not necessarily a hospital setting, but let's say an assisted living type of a setting where there are staff people and case managers to help them get jobs and live as independently as they possibly can. But we do need to have a public health response that I think has been historically lacking and is lacking today.
At the time of this broadcast, we know that there's an ongoing discussion about maybe a settlement with Big Pharma in regard to opioids. We know that there are many lawsuits that are ongoing that state attorney generals have filed. Not sure as to where Massachusetts stands. I'm sure that they're somehow in the mix as well. How do you hope as a sheriff, someone with a department, somebody who's part of this county that has shown that it is the leader when it comes to tackling this epidemic, are you hoping that those resources that may be gleaned from this lawsuit are somehow put back into organizations like the Sheriff's Department and EB Hope and the Plymouth County Extension, stuff like that? Are you hoping that that's what's going to happen with these monies, or are you afraid that it might go back into the general fund and it'll be spent on something else?
Well, let me say this, Kevin. I'm a man of faith, and I think that I think we'll do the right thing with this. But what I think I would like to see happen, I do know that we've seen a lot in the news recently. Johnson & Johnson just got hit with a big judgment.
Correct.
That's under appeal, which means I'm presuming that they're going to be negotiating this. I do know that Purdue Pharma is one of the biggies as well, but they are in the process of saying, let's skip this whole litigation thing.
I heard that today.
And go right, let's talk
$10
about
billion or maybe $12 billion.
Right.
And lots of towns, including Abington, jumped on board with these lawsuits. So
Yes.
I'm assuming it would be the towns and the county that would be getting some of the
Yeah,
this
and I
money.
think the Attorney General, as Kevin points out, Maura Healey has been very proactive with reference to a lot of these things, I know. So I think that the state would be there as well. What I would like to see us do is use, first off, that money for these purposes, to earmark it for these types of purposes, but also let's bolster, or I think recreate is what we would have to do, the public health service, so that we can, instead of incarcerating people for secure drug treatment, let's do it in a DPH, a Department of Public Health setting. So let's divert that money, not so much for corrections. I'm hoping we'll be able to spend it on public health, prevention services, those types of community outreach stuff, our community coalitions, and living arrangements for people who are addicted and people with mental health issues as well.
So digressing back to Andy's comment or his quotation as far as war on drugs, are you hoping that some of these monies will help maybe help the county and other agencies get a leg up in regards to some of these stronger, we talked about fentanyl, we got carfentanil. Who knows what the next strong or potent drug, deadly drug is going to be coming down the road? Is there a chance that maybe with this money that we can get ahead of this somehow, to be able to find a way to divert monies to help maybe offset the next big drug that's going to be coming on the horizon?
Right. And the next big drug that's on the horizon, who knows what that is?
Right.
Because several years ago, if you guys had told me about the fentanyl or the carfentanil, I would have laughed at you. I would have said, no, that's not even a thing.
It's an elephant tranquilizer. Carfentanil is an
That's what it is, and that's why it is so potentially fatal in such small exposures. So I think some of that money hopefully is going to be used to make like technology that will allow us to detect it without having to come into contact with it or close proximity or send canines in there. So I think that would be a very good use of that. And let's monitor. And a lot of this, as you guys all pointed out, is international. This isn't something that's happening on the West Coast and making its way east or vice versa. This is something that's happening internationally. It's happening in, Afghanistan and in China, and it's being, it's coming in through all these different sources. So I think that would be a great way to use some of that money. But the other thing, I think the best way for us to attack this is to get those treatment programs and living arrangements for folks such that we don't have a market for this type of stuff. And if there isn't any market, then they're not going to be developing it or sending it. So I think we do need to think about those things, but I'd love to see us attack this on the market side.
I think it keeps going back to what we've been saying all along. It's early education is the key, and hopefully someday the scales will tip. And we put more money into education, we'll have to, and less money into treatment.
Yeah.
That's the hope.
What about post-care? Like, okay, so now you've been rehabilitated. Is that where it ends, or is there follow-ups?
Every person is different. Everyone's journey is different. But I do think you correctly identify something that is very, very important is, once it's like when people are released from a correctional facility, even independent of any substance abuse issues, how do we assure that person that they're going to be able to get back to a normal life and not recidivate, not commit further crimes and end up back in jail? I think we do need to have those aftercare programs for recidivism, but also for folks who are battling these substance issues, and that follow through. It's like a good golf swing, or a slap shot. You got
Right.
to have that
We
follow
have
through.
to always go back to hockey.
Practice, right? Practice is,
Yeah.
an ongoing thing. I was just curious because we talk about getting people into treatment, but then it's like, okay, and we've had financial literacy folks on talking about, what happens.
Yeah.
You're in recovery, your problems are still there.
Right.
It's just now you're sober, and how do I deal with those?
Right. Yeah, and we have financial coach people that come in and do programs inside the correctional facility as well. We have virtually any kind of a program, and I invite you guys to come in for a tour anytime that you would like to see
We
these.
love that.
Yeah, we have all kinds of
Okay.
programs, vocational training programs. The idea of let's get people working, let's get them jobs. There's a lot that we do, and I think if we could bolster, here again, I'm coming back to the public Department of Public Health situation. If we were able to have a handoff from the correctional facility, get them out working, get them a job, and get them into some aftercare through DPH, that would be the best thing in the world. That's we are saving lives now, but I think we could save even more.
Even more. You have an event coming up. Tell us real quick.
We do, and I know that not everyone is a bowler. I myself am not much of a bowler, but I am going to. We've got this Battle of the Badges, the Fall Brawl. It's in Brockton at Westgate Lanes, and it's fighting substance abuse. It's a fundraiser for our community programs. There's a $200 entry fee for teams of 4, and there's all kinds of prizes that are there, and any proceeds that are raised are going to be going to fight this scourge, this opiate epidemic. And again, it's September 14th from noon to 4. If people don't golf, they're certainly more than welcome, or bowl, I should say. They're certainly more than welcome to stop by and have a few laughs as I try to get that giant bowling ball just down the center of the lane. It's actually the 10 pin. It's not the candle pin.
I was going to ask.
Like the Big Lebowski.
and
right? It's like-
no duck pin either.
and
No.
no duck pin. Can you give your website?
Sure. Our website for the sheriff's office is www.pcsdma.org. And what those are, I'll break that down. The Plymouth County Sheriff's Department, MA for Massachusetts.org.
Got it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sheriff.
Thank you, Sheriff.
Very much.
That's been my great pleasure to be with you guys.
Thank you. And we're going to take a short break, and we'll be back on Crosscheck.
1, 2, 3, 4. Boston, for Boston, we sing our grand refrain. For Boston, till wisdom's earthly fame. For here our word, our hearts are true, and the towers on the heights reach the heavens are blue. For Boston, till the echoes ring again. For Boston, till the echoes ring again.
Welcome back to Crosscheck. I'm Andy Bernstein here with Alex Bezanson, Kevin Tachi.
Kevin Tachi.
Well,
Our guest is always Kevin. That way we don't have to change the name.
Kevin.
It's like Tony Danza. Anytime he's in a show,
He's
usually
Tony.
He's Tony.
He's
Yeah,
Tony.
Tony.
It's the easiest.
Tony
easiest way to go.
Banta.
Yeah.
From Taxi.
Yeah.
Tony.
Yeah, you got a couple of Tonys.
What was his name? Who's the boss? I can't remember. Anyway, who's the boss? Sheriff. Fantastic.
Great show today.
Susan, awesome.
Susan, great, and we really enjoy having them on. And seriously, like Plymouth County, we do talk a lot about Plymouth County, but they really are doing.
So our people in Pittsburgh or anywhere that's listening to this, reach out to Plymouth County. We can help.
Exactly. And speaking of that, we can also help you out there who may need some information, help.
Our forward25.com.
Contact us page.
Contact us. Or, you can always reach us at WATD too. If you can't remember the website, just call WATD and they'll put you in touch with us.
781-837-1166.
Got it?
And that's why we have him. We love following Kevin on Monday nights.
It's an honor to be able to be the lead-in program, and also from time to time, I've been lucky. This is 2 times now that I've been able to skate on the 4th line and
There you go.
be a part of the program.
You're like Jimbo Hannon, who used to fill in for Larry King.
More like Dan Paye, but okay.
All right, we'll take it. All right, that's our show for the week. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate it, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.